Hey everyone, this is Kara with the OPI. I'll just give people more time to log in and get things set up.
Heart disease, Alzheimer's, gout.
Hello, everyone. This is Kara Flack with OPI. Hopefully you can hear me. And if you can't hear me, you won't be able to respond. So we're going to try something different. There's a lot of participants on the call, so you are muted. You cannot unmute yourself, so I'm going to request that you type in your questions in the chat box, and as we go along, I'll make sure we address your questions, or at the end, I'll wrap around and make sure we do address your questions, but just for the sake of feedback, because we are recording it, and we will put this out on our website later, I wanted to make sure it's clear for the users in the field who aren't available to be on the call right now. And just to recap, we're going to go through the Federal CARE Act, at least with the information that we're aware of at this point. So this document I have up is on our OPI COVID-19 page. It's the second section. I'll show you just so you're familiar. If you go to the COVID-19 OPI webpage, it's this section here, and this is the document. You click on this link right here, and just so you know, this document will be a changing and growing document, and we will put dates on it. So if there's any updated information, you'll see the date will be more current. Right now, it's April 2nd was the last change we made, and we'll keep that updated, and any other information we have will be on that web page as well. So I'll go through, and this is meant to be more of the details of the financial pieces of this and the uses and allowances. So we will go through what, like I said, what we do know already, and please do type in your chat box questions and just checking to see. Okay, so we'll get started. In summary, the CARES Act, I got to move a few things around. Oh, geez. All right, hang on 1 second. So the state of Montana is expected to receive 41. There's 41.3 is just the section that goes into one of our pieces, but let me go through this. So let me skip the summary. The Federal CARE Act is linked in here. This is the whole document, the whole act itself. I did try to put the page numbers in here of each section so you can go right to that page. This subtitle B is really about the waivers and the things at the federal level. They've included in that. That's more programmatic. Not going to go through the waivers or any of that information because it's not the financial piece, so I just wanted to focus on that. The Division B is really where the appropriations come in, so I'll go through that. And so we have updated this since we initially released it, where we had 3 funding sources, but there's really 4 possibilities in there, and I'll go through those. The first major piece is the amount that's allocated to the state, the OPI, and it's called the School Emergency Relief Fund for the state. That's $41.295 million. And of that, the OPI is able to set aside up to 10%, so 90% has to be allocated. And 10% can be set aside for the following determinants: administrative costs for emergency needs as determined at a statewide level, and can be addressed through plans. So at this point, we are projecting to set aside the 10% amount, and the reason we are doing that is so that we can do 2 things. The first one is we wanted to give a baseline of $10,000 to each elementary and high school program. And if you're a K-12 district, that means you would get $10,000 for an elementary and $10,000 for a high school. So we made sure K-12s are at the $20,000 level, and the elementary and high school districts separate are at $10,000. We know there's 32 districts who don't participate in Title I, and because this is allocated based on the Title I funding formula allocation, we went through and also included those 32 districts so there was some equitability. And I want to stress that although this funding stream is allocated based on the Title I funding formula, it is not restricted to the Title I allowances. That's the first caveat. I do also want to make sure people understand this is in addition to your Title I money and in addition to your general fund money or any state money that is already, state and local money that is expected to come into your school district this year and next year. I know we haven't set budgets yet, but this is in addition to that. The list, we do have a list of estimated amounts. I'll open that in 1 second. The funds allocated are to be used within so OPI has a 10%, the 10% pot I was talking about, which is $4.129 million. And we have a year from the time we receive the money to allocate all of that money out to a district level. And so I don't anticipate we'll have a hard time meeting that requirement. So there's my notes. Although it's a Title I distribution, it's not restricted to Title I uses, and it's not just for Title I districts because we have set aside the $4.1 million for those non-Title I districts. And just to go through briefly, the allowable uses are very broad, and we just want to make sure you understand what those are. These are pulled directly out of the CARES Act. It can be used for anything that is included in Carl Perkins grant. I think it's McKinney-Vento, IDEA-B, any of those programs that can be used for that. Coordination of preparedness and response efforts. Address the needs of your individual schools, activity to address the needs of low-income students, children with disabilities, English language learners, developing and implementing procedures and systems to improve the response efforts, training and professional development of staff, purchasing supplies to clean your facilities, planning and coordinating long-term closures, and that's very broad. Purchasing technology equipment if you're one of the districts and you remote learning and getting the internet and programs is set up, it can be used for that. Mental health services and support and activities necessary to maintain the operation. And so, you know, I'll let you guys read through these. It's out there. This is already in the statute. And that is correct. The timing of all of these funds is supposed to be expended by September 30th, 2021. We do believe that the federal government, we're waiting on clarification from the federal government on the Tidings Amendment, which allows the 1 year no cost extension for a year after that. So then it could be up to September 30th of 2022. So we're waiting on that clarification. I'm hearing that some people can't hear me, and I'm hoping you can. So some of the questions, supplement versus supplant, that's been a discussion in some follow-up information we're asking for. I would be careful of that. This is a one-time funding stream. There are some conditions on it, so I'm going to pause that discussion at the end for conditions. We can get waivers to the supplement versus the plant, so that's kind of an early on. Yeah, some people are saying the audio went out. And if your audio is not working, log out and log back in. I'll keep going. I do want to go through the, thanks, Kelly. I'm glad somebody can hear me. I want to go through the tentative list, just so you understand what this, perfect. Yeah, okay. So this is a preliminary estimation, and this is based on the last Title I allocation with our minimum placed in there. So here's, you know, your LE, obviously, you know, your elementary. Here was your Title I allocation. So the adjustment to minimum that we're saying in here is that baseline that we've talked about. So this Grant Elementary, I'll pick on you, your base allocation would have given you 3,179 of this 41 million, or 37 million, and we're adjusting that number to get you up to the 10,000 minimum. So the amount you're anticipated to receive, and I say anticipated because we're using numbers that have been developed from CCSSO organizations, so we're hoping they found these numbers in the right spot, but so your estimated allocations are going to be here. And this is for that first pot of money. And again, this money right here is federal money. It will be deposited in your Fund 15. It will be given through the eGrants system, and we will send out, the coding and information that's allowed in there. And as far as the allowable expenditures, read through that list, and you and the Board of Trustees, you're going to have to look through that and see if you think your expenditures fit into those categories. And there are some assurances, and I will go through those at the end. So this, I'll pause there. I know there's probably going to be a lot of follow-up questions. The important thing I want to note is that for this fund to start flowing to states, there has to be an application process through the U.S. Department of Education, and they're supposed to have that application out within 30 days of the enactment of this legislation. And then the federal government has 30 days from the time that application period is open to award the money and give it out to the states. I don't know what's in the application, that's for the OPI to worry about, but what I'm saying is you should be able to see this money start flowing within 60 days. We've heard that the U.S. Department of Education is trying to streamline that, make it a quicker process, and we hope that's true, but we'll keep you updated as far as the timeline. And we're also looking, on a national level, they're looking at whether or not this money can be retroactively used. So those are some clarifications that we're waiting for on a bigger picture level. So, okay, so for the estimated amount inclusive of the 10K, yes, the totals on that page this is the estimated allocation that the district will receive in total for number one at this point. So if these districts, Polaris Elementary, you're expected to get 10,000. If that's kind of a bad example. Yeah, if you're Red Lodge Elementary, you're expected to get 52,000. This total is inclusive of all the adjustments we have made to get you to this baseline level. I hope that answers your question. District wait to see. Okay. I'm going to move on to number 2. So the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund is almost 8.8 million-ish. This funding stream is given to the Governor's office. The Governor's office has to determine how it's going to be allocated, and essentially he can use it to support the most significantly impacted virus areas. So we don't know from the Governor's office yet how he's going to allocate that or what his plan is, and I know they're pretty busy over there working on these things, so we'll keep in touch with them and let you know. Number 3 is a big pot of money. It's the Federal Education Stabilization Fund, $300 million for the whole nation. We're getting clarification if it's a direct grant to states or if it goes directly to LEAs. Right now, we don't have any information on that process, but we will, like I said, this is a living document. As we get more information, we'll update this as soon as we know those details. Number 4 is the one we've added to this document since the first release, and that's the federal Save Schools and Citizenship Education. If any district has received the Project Serve money, looks like it hasn't been appropriated for quite a few years, so there may be some. But this one, I reached out to the feds yesterday to ask them how they were going to allocate this money out, and they said just keep watching their website for information. So as we get any details on that, when the application period is open, if it's directly going to go to LEAs, we'll let you know. I did put a link to what the generally what the application and what the guidelines are here, but this one's specifically used for helping schools clean and disinfect schools and assist in counseling and distant learning and associated costs, which also could be very broad, depending on what you're looking at. So number 5 are some other highlights that we wanted to make sure we emphasize. So the state agencies have to provide an assurance that maintenance of effort can be maintained, or we have to ask for a waiver. And I think at this point we're looking at the waiver. I don't see a reason not to do the waiver, but that's still an early on process. The second bullet point is kind of an interesting one, and that means that when the state applies for these monies, we have to assure that the LEAs, to the greatest extent practicable, will continue to pay employees and contractors. And I think everyone here is tired of me saying I'm using bus contractors as an example. Are you paying all your contractors and your employees? Some interesting thoughts around that for people to think about is if you have bus aides and you've reallocated their duties, but they don't want to do those duties and choose not to work, does that mean it was practicable? Should you still be paying them even though you provided different work? As far as your contractors, it's going to have to be a local decision on what is practicable for your district. And, certainly look at that sheet and what you're estimated to receive. Is that way more than what you would pay contractors? Those are just some things to think about, but local decision, you guys and your board of trustees will have to make those determinations. The other section we're looking at, getting more clarification from the feds, is that there's a provision in there that equitable services have to be provided to private schools. Talking with Jack O'Connor, right now Title I includes the private school counts or needs, and then the district receives the Title I allocation and has to provide the equitable service to the private schools in that area. We anticipate that's going to work the same, but we haven't received any other official guidance from the U.S. Department of Education. If there is more information about that, I'll keep you guys posted, but at this point I would strongly recommend districts who have this private school equitability in your area start taking that into consideration in these allocations. And under that same section is the provision that if there's, I use as an example, if you purchase a bunch of computers for a private school, those computers have to be retained under public ownership. Just the same as if you purchase any laptops for students, you can't give the laptops to students. They have to be retained at a public ownership level. And that's pretty standard with any federal money, but if there's questions or any information that you want on that in addition to it, Uniform Grant Guidance is going to certainly show you that, but we can talk about that more if you want later. Sorry, I'm trying to read through some questions here. So the determination of how each school receives the $41 million the baseline was the Title I allocation, and then the OPI has done the 10% set aside to try to level out a minimum of $10,000 for each program, elementary and high school. And yes, the Project Serve does look like it's an old revenue source in the federal government, and I'm not sure why they picked that for that section, but that is where they're saying it's going to be allocated. And I don't know how we'll know who's going to be eligible or how much is available because the federal government hasn't determined all of those details. They just know they have $100 million allocated, and that's all they're giving right now. Yeah, and so Rita, we are looking at will this funding be a retroactive pot of money, like from the beginning of when this all started? We're waiting on clarification of those. There is not an application for this At this point, the OPI has to fill out an application to the federal government, but if there is any application processes, you will definitely be aware of that. And as far as can you use it to pay for hours of emergency sick leave, I would look at the conditions under that first section and see if you can justify it fits in one of those categories. Okay, there's just a few more bullets here. Yes, these funds will be deposited in the miscellaneous fund, and we will have additional program reporter codes and revenue codes to send out before these funds get dispersed. And one question we do seem to get a few thoughts on, is this going to affect your general fund budget this year, next year? How does it affect all that? And because it's run like another grant, it shouldn't have any effect. The thing you do want to consider is if you're offsetting your base costs in your budgets, you might have different ending balances, or you might have different revenue streams to play with, but that's your local decision level. So, and there's the expended date, that's September 30th we talked about with the possible 1-year no-cost extension. We're getting clarification if that falls in. Yeah, Shay, I agree the greatest expense practicable. How does it apply to employees that are choosing not to work when work's being offered? I think that's what your board of trustees and your district's going to have to determine what is practicable in that extent and what makes sense. You know, and that might be a legal question to pick up from there. So I have Paul here with me. Paul, is there anything else that you can think of that we should talk about?
Well, because I've been in and out of the room, I didn't hear the majority of this. No, but hi, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. Ask your questions.
Okay, I'm going to try and unmute you. I'm hoping it's not mass chaos, so please mute your end. And if you have any questions, comments, now is the time. And if you have other general questions or comments we can answer, feel free to ask. So, giving this a try.
This is our life.
Okay, so I'm going to mute everybody, but you can unmute yourself now where you couldn't before. Let me see if we have any new. This is treated just like a federal grant, so there shouldn't be, you're not allowed to transfer your federal funds to any of your other funds. So no, this shouldn't be money transferred to another one. You can journal expenditures that are appropriate in this grant, but you shouldn't be trying to transfer this. You cannot transfer this to your other funds.
Oh, it's a good, yeah.
Yeah, so Melvin, will these funds be advanced or will they be reimbursable? That is a good question. I will find that out. And nope, there are no silly questions. Yeah, we'll find out if it's going to be advanced or reimbursable. That is a good question. Does anybody else have any questions? These funds should be available at from the time the act was put into place, and like I said, we're trying to find out if it's retroactively allowable to be used. When the cash actually starts flowing, that's what we're not sure. So we'll get that.
Did you read the 100% count?
Yeah, can we 100% count on these dollars? I can say 100% that every district will get a portion of these dollars. Right now, the amounts we have in that estimated sheet are based on the estimated numbers we received from the CCSSO, and they've done an allocation down to the state's level, so we're waiting on final clarification when the grant awards actually get to each state agency. So I would use those as estimations at this point, but there will be money. It's how much, yes, we will get them out there as soon as we can. Okay. This is some.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I gotta make your box bigger here. Okay,
If, especially co-ops getting the funds.
No, Mary, at this point, this conversation did come up yesterday, and the district will have to work with the special education co-op to have this discussion.
Well, the allocation was required by the federal government to be distributed to public schools based on the amount of Title I distribution that they had received in 2019. And because co-ops serve public schools, but they weren't qualified to receive under the provision or what the law stated. So, right, I imagine the district could work with the co-op to support their co-op using these funds if that's a permissible expenditure. But as far as the allocation method that was required by the feds, sorry, it doesn't go to feds in this case. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the co-op.
Can it be used to hire additional teachers to help with interventions next school year? And I bet in all of these 12 conditions behind me that it falls within one of those. I would just read through those and figure out how you think it fits into those, and it's a pretty liberal use of this money, so I would think you could find one of those and figure out how to fall in there, especially there's a section in here about helping, I think it's, oh gosh, I know, I'm sorry, you guys can't see all this stuff I'm clicking over here. Yeah, activities to dress, no, that's homelessness. Yeah, I don't see why you couldn't, but I know there's one in here that I was thinking it would fit under, but I would read through those. The employee working piece again, had no audio. Yeah, so there's a condition in there, and as far as employees working, it says this, and I picked out this term, it's only one sentence, must to the greatest extent practicable continue to pay employees and contractors. And as far as what that is, you guys will laugh, but I looked up the definition this morning out of curiosity, and it's able to be done or put into practice successfully. So that's your benchmark is this term. So I would certainly work with your legal people. If you're an NCSBA member, work with them, figure out what falls within there. Dropping, I gotta move you back over. Due to a drop in A and B, we were going to have to cut some positions for next year. Reading the line that says it can be used to keep, can we use this? Like I say, Carol, as long as it falls within those 12 conditions, you can use it. I would just wait for the final determination, but this is allowable. And the only consideration I would tell school districts is that this is a one-time shot kind of money. You know, you have a time period to use it, so sustainability after that is a consideration, but just however you can figure out to use in these 12 conditions, it can be used. Q&A, some of the questions for those not able to. Okay, Sharon, that's a good idea to have a question and answer published with some of the questions. You know, certainly please send me an email of some of the things you think keep coming up, and we will add those to this document. Like I said, this is going to be a living document, so it'll have changes to it probably regularly and as we get more information in. Hi, Mary. I think we addressed the special ed co-ops that has to work with the districts that are your member districts. Could you cover our traditional funding sources and whether any of those will be reduced? You told me yesterday about recording. Oh, Lori, hi. The traditional funding sources are still going to be paid and planned for as they are now. Any existing federal and state dollars are still in play. Those are still continuing. This money is on top of that money. Lori, your question about transportation is the state is going to pay transportation as is. The district was operating traditionally through the year. For example, if you had 6 bus routes and I get you're probably not using your bus routes. We're still going to reimburse the district on those 6 bus routes for the days the school was expected to be open. So if that's the full 90 days for the semester, we'll pay you for those 6 existing bus routes for 90 days. Same with individual contracts. The only caveat I put out there for individual contracts is we'll pay you for them. We're not saying you have to pay the parents for days that kids aren't transported. That is a funding stream that you can use with those other allowances that are expanded on the COVID-19 page as well. So, whoops. Oh, down. Okay, Paul's keeping me on track because I'm losing. Oh, there we are.
Okay, will districts trap funds?
Yes, we are expecting this money to flow through e-grants. Yeah, and I'll find out whether or not this will be a one lump sum, or are we going to send it to you in pieces, or I can't imagine it'll just be a reimbursement process, but I'm going to have to follow up with Jay Phillips and figure out how that's going to happen, and we probably need clarification from the feds how that funding stream is going to get to OPI as well, because we have to have the cash to give you the cash. So using funds. So John, yeah, you know, as far as using these funds to pay for staff the district was planning to cut, that's certainly an eligible thing. Just remember that that this money is a one-time shot, so sustainability is something you have to think about. But you know, if you can meet one of these 12 conditions, you can use the money for that. And these are funds are funneled through Title I. Will there be same requirements as most e-grants, or is it going to be different because it goes in the miscellaneous fund? Well, hopefully all your federal funds are going into your miscellaneous fund, but the requirements as far as reporting and that we're not entirely sure of. There is a whole section in the CARE Act about the reporting requirements, but since we haven't filled our application to the federal government, we're not exactly sure of all the information they'll want to collect. I imagine you're going to have to do the financial reporting, but as soon as we get more information, we will keep you posted. Will the money be added to e-grants? Yeah, the money will be on e-grants. I'm just not sure how you will withdraw that, or if it'll be a grant award. I'm not sure that we'll even have an application, but I will get that information as soon as we know. So private schools have easier access to the funds than our co-ops. I don't know. It depends on the district. And so the private schools are already supposed to be getting equitable services through the Title I program. That's expected to continue. Special ed co-ops, because they're also included in all those allocations, I would hope they can work with their member districts and figure out what is reasonable or work something out. That's going to have to be at the local control level. And equitable services for private isn't necessarily just a financial thing. It's just providing equitable service. And districts that have those in there probably know way more about that than I do. Okay, number 3. Yeah, there's a lot of these that are pretty wide open. Did you mention some? I don't know if there's an application process. It appears that states only bring in schools that did not receive at least 10K up to the level. If we already received 10K, there's no increase. That is correct at this point. We wanted to provide a baseline, and it was structured similarly to like Title IV, where there's a minimum. There's still some flexibility in the 10% set aside that the superintendent can use. I'm not sure how she's planning on using it yet, but she's collecting ideas. So if you have a thought for the amount of money that is still left in that 10% set aside, which I think at this point is $2 million. Let me look. It's actually at the end of this sheet Paul did. At this point, we're waiting on some clarifications, but I just went right past it. So the amount remaining is, you know, about $3.4 million. So if you have some ideas on how the superintendent should allocate that money, you know, you can certainly zip me or her or Dylan an email, and we'll take that over to her for her consideration. there any other way the money can be dispersed? Seems like,
You know, the federal guidelines were clear as to how the distribution of funds were to occur, and so there really isn't a different way. There's no other mechanism for the initial $37 million to be distributed that was set forth in that statute.
yeah, and so the 90%, you know, 90% of the 41 million is 37.16 million. That was not optional for OPI. So the set aside amount is 4 million. That's the only leeway the superintendent has. Is there any other way the money can be dispersed? Seems like, oh yeah, that was
That's all.
response to that. What will some of the assurances be? At this point, the assurances I'm aware of, because they're listed specifically in the statute, are these. You know, maintenance efforts, but we can ask for a waiver, paying your contracts and employees to the greatest extent practicable, providing equitable services, retaining public ownership of anything that's purchased with these monies. Those at this point are the assurances I'm aware of. These are OPI considerations for you. And the fund, you know, the timeline is, of course, a federal timeline. How about distributing the remainder of the funds to the schools who were unsuccessful in the grant process regarding transformational learning? I will put that idea to the superintendent for her thought bank.
I had that idea.
So Shay, could OPI use the excess of the 10%, make sure that state major maintenance dollars are distributed?
You know, even at current, that distribution comes out in May. You know, we were going to be short almost 2%, and now that the economy's not doing so well, I don't know what interest off that the corpus of the coal subtrust will be. You're still going to be within 5 to 7% of the amount that was requested for 2021. Don't quote me on that number, please. But yeah, there may be a shortage. I just don't see that it's going to be a drastic one still, even with this. But boy, I agree with you. It would be neat to shore that up with these funds.
Yeah, just make sure next year everybody's budgeting for some of that money so we always get it out for the next legislative session. Okay, so basically these federal dollars include federal funds that would have normally been received, and there are some additions. So this particular pot, even though it's allocated based on the Title I formula, is in addition to any existing federal dollars that were awarded. It has a whole different very broad usage allowance, but it's in addition to any of the federal funds. So a rural small district will receive $10,000 of the new money. That is correct. So my question, what would have been received before the extra was added? Oh, are you saying before we did the minimum $10,000 adjustment? And it would be on the sheet if that's what you're thinking. So let me pick on one of these districts. Sorry, Bynum, if you're on the phone. They would have received $3,000, and then we're allocating out of the 10% set aside $6,900 to give them to the $10,000 amount. So Bynum would have received $3,000 by the standard 90% formula. Then this is what comes out of our set aside of 10%. So I hope that answers your question. If that's not it, let me know. Just a reminder that federal funds determine in part what kind of audit you need. Some schools might have to plan for, yes, Mike, you are correct. That is true. Yep, you might be pushed up into that next audit threshold. Good point.
Do you think the waiver would cover that?
No. No, they have to, so on a federal, that's in the federal CFR guidelines, $750,000. So unless for some reason they changed it on a federal level, you would be stuck with that federal audit. So yeah, do keep that in account. Schools who receive the transformational dollars should be exempt from the remaining 3.7. Huh? That's it. Okay, that's a good point. Exactly, the economy, yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, Mike. Oh, Mike, you're not trying to spread any sunshine.
No, thanks, Mike.
What did Montana receive before the CARES for the 2020 year? For Title I is what I'm guessing you're asking, and I think Title I was close to 41 million. Do you know off the top of your head, Paul?
I think it's a little bit north of that. I thought it was in the low 50s.
Low 50s, yeah. Can you remind us of the limit, the minimum amount that BOMOS is up? The minimum limit is $10,000 per program. So for elementary, it's $10,000. For high school, it's program. Oh, minimum. Okay, the minimum for the federal audit level is $750,000 in federal revenue. Mike Waterman doesn't get to be president.
Yeah, you know it's falling apart.
So is there any, I agree with you, Cal. Any other questions? Any other questions not related to the CARES Act that we can help with while we have y'all on the phone?
Uh-oh.
I'd unmute you, but I don't have confidence you all muted yourself.
He estimated what did they have, 30 days or 30 days?
Anticipated date that E-grants will be up, yeah. So the initial, from the CARES Act, when it was signed, the federal government has 30 days to put the application out there, and then they have another 30 days to award the amounts to states. So within 60 days, we should know the final allocation. And like I said, the federal government is trying to streamline that. I don't know what that streamline will look like. I hope within 60 days is what I'm. A little thing to think about, reporting these expenditures by school location. Hey, let's not jump the gun on this. And I just want to say the first ESSA per pupil expenditure went out on March 16th, which was in the middle of all this. I have not received one question about it, and I don't know if any districts did, but that's a whole different story.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's a federal grant. It's going to have its own revenue and program code. So, yeah, I mean, whatever accounting you're doing currently for federal grants, and if they're by location, yeah, I would assume this one counts as well.
Yeah, and so on a serious note, yes, the ESSA requirement is, especially on federal money, you want to allocate to a school code. So if you are spending this money specifically for one school, you use the school code when you report these expenditures. If you're using it, based on that enrollment average, remember Mayfair can allocate based on enrollment from the October count, so we can do that on your behalf. But if these expenditures are specifically in one area, please do code it that way. Okay. If you get Title I money and there's no adjustments, does it mean the school gets no share of this money? No. So the share of this amount that your district is expected to get is going to be in this total allocation column. So if you get Title I money, and even if you do not get Title I money, you are getting an allocation from this pot. Some nations, schools have talked about shifting staff out of federal funds. They were notified they could not spend the federal funds. I'm thinking these were some of the specialized funding. Yeah, and that's an interesting issue. The only thing I do know is that you can't report special education expenditures for things that aren't actually services that aren't actually being provided. That piece I know. As far as, as a standard on grant money, if you hire an employee in a grant and they take leave, you're in uniform grant guidance, you're allowed to continue to charge that to the grant. But this time, I don't know if they're changing that. So let me get some clarification, because that's a good general question of federal money. Oh, somebody's unmuted. Have the preliminary title amounts gone out? For this fiscal year, I think so, but if you're thinking of next fiscal year, I don't believe we're there. And that would be a Jack question, and I don't think, yeah, and I don't think there's any instability that we're aware of on the Title I funds. Will there be changes to the second semester? Will we just put in scheduled days? Shauna, yes, you want to put in scheduled days for existing routes and individual contracts. Do not try to add new routes or do not try to add new individual contracts. We're giving you what you had in place before school closure came. Cindy Foley, you are welcome. Okay, sounds like general fund, transportation fund are fully funded. Our lunch reimbursement is still just based on meals. Yeah, and as far as school nutrition, if you have any questions on that, you really should contact your school nutrition specialist because there's so many intricacies and nuances in those that contact them. But as far as your general fund and transportation fund, they're still funded as they were scheduled to be funded before the school closure came into effect. Okay, Shay, I do see something about it, so I will get a hold of you. Next year, okay, yeah, next year, I don't think the allocations for Title I have been out yet. So if you spend this money on special education, how will you identify that in the reporting? And this,
Yeah.
I'll let Paul address that, yeah.
Yeah, Paul can't address that just yet because we need a program code for this money to track it. So, right, you want to put it on a 280 expenditure. I don't have an answer to that at this moment. Anybody got a suggestion?
Yeah. Did you say that we do not have to pay parents for the second semester transportation contracts, but we can choose to? So as far as transportation, you do need to reimburse parents up to the point of the school closure. From the point beyond that, that's a local control decision on what the district does with the transportation funds.
Oh. It's federal money.
In addition to the question, can Title I employees continue to be paid out of Title I even when we are considering them on call? Yeah, that's a clarification, Sherry, I'll get. My initial response is it's always been allowed, but that doesn't mean right now it's kind of different. So I'll check. Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Denise. Yeah, I feel dumb now. 280 expenditures are state and local special education expenditures. So it is federal money.
Oh, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so still code them with the program code we will give you. Can we use, you can use project reporter codes however you want to use them. So if you want to put a project reporter code with your sped costs, certainly do that. You're going to be required to have one in the Fund 15, but yeah, what you set those up at is going to be your, the district decision. The questions related to MOE or reversion. That is printed out of state and local. So 280 applies, but but CARES money is federal. Oh, I think, Denise, are you just saying because of 280, we don't need to use the 280 code because it doesn't match state or federal money?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. Can we continue to use the tuition fund for sped costs even with distance learning? Yeah, it's just, we're saying the new normal right now is distance learning. So if you're providing those services to the kids that were under that tuition fund or budgeted there or applicable to be there, you certainly could do that. Just make sure they're associated with those students. Yep, the CARES money will go directly to these districts on the sheet. And if a district chooses to pay some to another district or send it to another district, that's certainly between the districts, not from us. Because we are required to do that. 90% of the 41 million has to be on the Title I allocation. So we do not have any flexibility on 90% of that cost. Are there any other questions? Well, thanks, everyone. I don't see anything else in the chat box. I appreciate your time, and hopefully we helped answer some questions. If not, you can email me for sure. And have a great day.
Thanks, Kara and Paul.